when you have ideas, you need to explain them to other people. It's kind of often impossible to do that without diagrams. I also find diagrams are super useful for formulating ideas myself and putting things into a coherent sort of system. I do, however, find that diagrams are super annoying to do. I find myself always shuffling boxes and trying to make my lines not cross and things like that. So I want to talk about techniques that I use to make diagrams bearable to create, and in the process some techniques that have also made it possible to make other things possible. Imagine you're creating a haiku service. Haiku, if you don't know, are sort of like mini poems. They're usually about 3 lines long or so. If you are allowing users to upload haiku, you don't want to ask users to categorize and upload images. You want to use the text in a haiku to automatically pick up images, to automatically categorize. How might you go about thinking about making this to work? For me, the answer was to draw a diagram. So in this basic diagram, I'm not going through it in detail, it's not super relevant, but you have a request, you validate it, you spell check it, you find some prominent words. Prominent words for me are just nouns. Search Flickr, download images, categorize, put in database, etc. I did this diagram, and then I realized that it would never fit on my page. So I started shuffling it around. So I made it like this. I realized that publish was then at the bottom left. I didn't like this idea. So I started moving it around again, and I got to this stage, which I felt was much better. Having done this diagram, I sat back and thought, what can I do to make this better? Once I picked my prominent words, I realized I could categorize and search Flickr simultaneously. So my diagram became this. Then I realized that I'm in Node, so I can actually store information about copyright and rights usage in the database at the same time as I'm downloading images. So I changed it to this, in the process completely ruining my diagram. That's my publish, which is the final stage in the process. So again, I had to shuffle my diagram. I got to this, which is a pretty bad diagram. For a developer, I can follow it, and it does help me formulate my thoughts, but it's not really presentable. And if you wanted to add more to this diagram, you would find it quite difficult. So I was thinking about if there's a better way to draw diagrams, one where I'm not continually fiddling and making lines not cross. But if I could use my favorite tool, the text editor, to write something like this. And it would draw me this. Going and looking at the whole haiku service again. If I write this all in one line, it can draw me my original, single path diagram. We know that some of these processes need to happen in parallel because we're in Node. So this is the second diagram, source code, as such. There are 2 paths to get from prominent words to publish. It's just 2 lines. There's nothing else to it, but this creates this. Getting to the final stage, this creates this. So I've saved a lot of time, and I've made something which, for me, I can update really quickly and keep relevant without much hassle. And to me, the output's better. It's not beautiful, but it's okay. For internal diagrams, I think it's important to stress updatability over beauty. But if you want to add other things like colours and shapes to your diagrams, you can do this as well. That's how you add colours to lines. If you wanted to change a shape, you could just add another attribute, shape square, and change labels. Data structures can be described like this, which is a little bit weird, but it is serviceable. The nice thing about this is you can point arrows directly to the actual cells within that shape directly. I'd like to show you a few full diagram examples. In this example, I've used subgraphs to denote different areas of a system. So there's an app which is on the back end. You've got code which is in the front end, and you have sort of library kind of things as well. In this, I've used subgraphs, record syntax, and colouring to highlight the areas of the diagram that I'm discussing in the text. There's this is sort of like the unit test for GraphViz. By the way, GraphViz is not anything that I wrote. It's a proper project that's been going on a long time, and is used in lots of places. So this shows a lot of things that you can do with GraphViz. You've got subgraphs and labels of subgraphs and arrows going everywhere in different shapes. This website's actually quite nice because you can easily change this and let it draw diagrams for you. Next up, a quick tool that I wrote, which just wraps GraphViz. I did this in about an afternoon for the first initial pass. It was really quite easy to do. I've expanded it quite a lot to add extra features for other projects, but basically it was half a day of coding. Imagine you're creating an e-commerce website. For me, when I start thinking about databases, and this is what this tool is for, I start thinking about the major things which I have in my system. So for an e-commerce website, I think accounts, orders, products, and you probably need something to join orders and products together. So let's call that a line. Accounts have a password, perhaps. Orders might have a total. Products probably have a price. And we know that lines join the two things together. So if we put order ID going to order and product ID going to product, and an order has an account ID. There we go. A very quick way to draw diagrams, all built on the shoulders of giants in a very short amount of time. A long time ago, I did a project called SyncIt, which is for data synchronization. I'm not covering that, but to do this problem, I had to make some quite complicated data structures, because when you're doing synchronization, you need versioning, and to do versioning and store changes, you need sort of quite long lists. So what I found was, when I was doing this, I found it very difficult to find why my code was breaking. So I integrated GraphViz into my unit tests. You won't be able to particularly see this too well while it's running because it's really quick, but if you had a bug, you could look at that one test and it would stop and show you that data structure at the point that it crashed. So we'll give that a run. And then the diagrams that it draws are very similar to the README, and that's because it uses the same code. But I found it incredibly useful for debugging. Lastly, there's a new project of mine called NWQ, which is a way to write systems based solely on queues. So I found that, jumping ahead. Going back to the haiku example, if we have spelling checking to pick up our nouns and adjectives and find things which are wrong, you look at a word and go, is it spelled correctly? This goes off to an external service. It's either spelled correctly or not. If it is, you find the prominent words in that and you pass those over to the next stage in the queue. If it's not, you put it in a different queue. I find myself writing code like this quite often. This isn't particularly bad code, or I don't think so, but when I look at it, most of the code here is receiving a message, it's sending a message, it's deleting the message from where I got it from. The actual useful bit of business logic, if you can call it that for a haiku service, is only the highlighted section. Can you see highlighting? Anyway, it's these 5 lines practically. This was what I wanted to write, where a function returns, accepts a payload. And you then go off and you query your external service, and depending on if the words are correct or not, you put it in one of 2 queues. And to put it in one of 2 queues, you either pass a resolution of success or misspelt. You would configure it like this. So a success will go in the prominent words queue, and a misspelt will go in the log and inform user queues. You give it a name and you bind it to a function. Once I'd done that, I figured that now I had this standard interface for accessing queues. All my messy non-business logic was in a very standard form. So I could very simply put a diagram in that. I thought this would be really useful because, again, when things break, if you've got 20 steps in this process and they're all separate queues which are reading off queues, if something goes wrong on the 7th stage, you might get back an error or nothing might come out the other end. But where did it go wrong? You need to be able to debug this. What does it look like when you run it? This is an empty screen. If I run this curl command, which I don't know if you can make it out, it's not particularly too important, the actual thing, but it basically just does a HTTP request and dumps some data in there. Once you run it, it will start drawing how things are going through your system. And this is actually linked directly to Amazon SQS right now, and it's reading and polling. And when it's all successful, or if it's not, I don't know whether this will work or not. I suppose it doesn't particularly matter for this demonstration, but you can see the process that it went through. And we kind of have a diagram that we started with, but actually we know that throughout the process, everything kind of ended with success. And where it joined, we were waiting for another response. And in the end, we got through to success, which I think is pretty useful. Probably more useful when it goes wrong, but yeah. So these are the links and where I got my stuff from. So GraphViz is the big project that does the diagrams. It's used very heavily in routers. Mike Daines did the cross-compilation of GraphViz to JavaScript. So often it's just a Unix utility which you can pipe a diagram source code into, and it will give you back a PDF or an SVG or whatever you ask it to. Clearly, when you've got this cross-compiled thing. It's probably a little bit big to serve to clients, but for me, it's not about doing it properly. It's about forming ideas and debugging. I used Ramda a lot. Ramda's like a Lodash sort of replacement, but done much better. The tools I used was Express, Babel, AWS, Chime, Mocha, ESLint, and YAML. That's me, Forrester, and these are some of the links to the projects that I've mentioned. Lastly, but not least, this is where I work, landinsight.io. We're doing lots of cool stuff with Geo, trying to solve or help solve the housing crisis. We're currently looking for a junior, so if you feel that you're suitable for that, or might be, talk to me afterwards or visit that URL, and there's a jobs page on there for you to submit your details. Thank you.